Welcome to the Why Not Real Estate Podcast, where you will learn top strategies from world-class real estate investors, both large and small. Why not? Tune in and get started today.
Be open to partnerships sooner. I was very much lone wolf. I still fight with those tendencies to be very lone wolf, and it's some trauma of some bad partnerships in the past, and I let it linger quite a bit. And I'm just recently in the past couple of years starting to get over that and partnering with the right type of people. And again, if I was more open to that and less thinking the world was against me earlier on, I could have really taken the trajectory and just skyrocketed from that first purchase, as opposed to what I did, which was pump the brakes, enjoy life a little bit more, which I don't regret at all. But my investments really slowed down until, just recently pre-COVID.
Hey, what's up, all of my real estate peeps? This is Brian Lucier back on season 2 of the Why Not Real Estate Podcast, where we believe investing in multifamily real estate is one of the most profitable asset classes out of all real estate. Today, our guest today, I've seen him present before. Fascinating story, which I'm so happy to be able to share with you on this show. Let's get started here. Our guest today is a seasoned construction and consulting professional with over 2 decades of multifamily and commercial property development experience, and he has navigated a dynamic career rooted in early construction exposure. Armed with a master's in construction management and a bachelor's in architectural engineering technology, our guest brings a robust educational foundation to his leadership roles at his company, Real Value Ventures. His strategic prowess shines in the successful planning of execution of large-scale capital expenditure projects, managing multi-million-dollar restorations with precision. Holding a Massachusetts construction supervisor's license, our guest is known for his innovative problem-solving, client-centric approach, and deep industry knowledge that surpasses emergency response, ensuring client satisfaction and successful project outcomes. With a forward-thinking vision, he also stands as a valuable asset for any ambitious development teams. Ladies and gentlemen, all of my real estate peeps, it is my pleasure to introduce and have on the show today, Mr. Dan Milinazzo. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's quite the intro. I appreciate that.
I get that every episode, and I always have to put the spotlight back on the guest. It would have not sounded as good if it was not about you. So this is all about you on today's show, and so happy to have you here. I think the first time I heard you speak was at one of Nick's events, and you rolled out a presentation which was really eye-opening, and I think I grabbed all your contact info. We've been going back and forth. Now, I think you were involved with a really huge project in downtown Gardner, Mass.
Yeah, I'm actively involved in a big 30-unit conversion, taking some old office space, turning into some residential. So mixed use, definitely a heavy lift, but the area needs it. So I'm definitely happy to be a part of that big project.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more that that area needs it. And I actually
Yeah.
live right down the street from there. So I've been watching that project as it's been going on. Well, I live down the street, but today I am not in Massachusetts. But that's okay. So, Dan, if it's okay with you, I'd love to get rolling and start the interview and ask you some questions.
Absolutely. Let's get to it.
All right, Dan, so obviously we know that you're a real estate professional and you've done some pretty amazing things, but could you tell us a little bit about your background and what you used to do before getting into real estate?
Ooh, I mean, before real estate, I don't really remember much at that point. I was probably a teenager. I mean, I think I bought my first property when I was 23 or 24. So before that, it was college, and that's actually what I first got introduced to real estate through Robert Kiyosaki and I think it was Donald Trump as well. They were both presenting at the Real Estate Wealth Expo in Boston, and I happened to be in school in Boston at the time, so kind of hit me then. But I mean, I grew up in a two-family home, so I kind of had exposure to that. My parents were not big fans of real estate at that point. It wasn't fun dealing with tenant issues, but it was kind of just inherited tenants, and it wasn't like a big heavy lift. But yeah, before that exposure to real estate, I mean, my father owns and operates a small roofing business, and that's kind of, when I was 10 years old, I was picking up slate and shingles, and my paycheck was based on how many nails I picked up off the ground, and I'd have to put that up against any tires. So if I said I picked up every nail on that job and he lost a tire because a client got, ran over something, I lost my paycheck. So it was a quite the experience growing up. But yeah, I mean, I've been around the trades since then, and it was around that time that I started sketching and things like that. So I started to draw my attention more towards architecture, and then I went to school for architecture. And so it's just kind of been a good blend of the two, you know what I mean? Architecture, design, and the construction side. So it's definitely been a deep thread of my passion throughout my life.
So you've said some really interesting things I want to just highlight on here. That wealth building annex was in 2001. I was there.
It was a while ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a while ago. I think it was 2001. So interesting. Your dad had that roofing business, and
Yeah.
I did not know this, but we have a little bit of a parallel timeline here. My dad was a builder. So you were picking up nails and shingles and slate, and I was moving plywood to second and third floors of properties that my dad was building. So the
Yeah.
roofing company. So it sounds like you always grew up around real estate.
Yeah, I can't remember a time I wasn't. I mean, and if it wasn't real estate, it was Lego. You know what I mean? As a kid, it was Lego. I mean, I still to this day I build and I create with Lego. My kids love it as well. I mean, I like to build models and things like that as well. So, at my desk I always have little things like there's just a plane, like those Metal Earth models. And again, on my desk I always keep this, which is a fun little experiment. I made that in a glass blowing shop. Not that you'd ever want a hammer made of glass, but there's uh there's some deep meaning behind that if you if you dive into it. But I've always been around it. It's just it's in the genetics, you know what I mean? It's there.
All right, we're like twins on separate planets here. In college, I did glass blowing as well, so a blow
Nice.
rod and a punty and all that. And if you built that hammer, I know that that was not easy to do.
No.
No, that was pretty cool. Could you show that up one more time? I'd love to see that. Get out! Oh my God!
I
So
wouldn't pull any nails with it, but it was definitely fun. It is not perfect. I got a nice little blue, there's like a blue streak in there from some leftover stuff that wasn't cleaned out, but it was a fun experience. And again, I mean, it says a lot right there.
wow, two different bubbles to create that.
Yep.
Wow, wow, that there's a rabbit hole I'm gonna try to avoid because I mean, we could just like go down left field on that one, the good old days.
Yep.
So you lived in a multifamily, and if I heard you right, your parents owned it.
Yes. Yep.
So you grew up having tenants who were paying the rent, and you had all those dinner conversations talking about tenants since you were a young boy.
Yeah, yeah. It every once in a while came up that, why the tenant wasn't paying their rent, and then improving the house so we can take some equity out of it to do some other things. So, it wasn't like a deep thread. It wasn't their passion. It was just kind of it's how life was when I grew up in Lowell. It's just kind of what it was, and it was a small multifamily, just a two family, but it was in a smaller residential block. So it wasn't like a big, massive 12 family, so that my mother was like a real and like keen investor. It was just kind of, this was our home. We essentially house hacked, and it got us kind of that type of exposure. And didn't understand the financial side of it at that point, but it must have left some kind of an impression on me because that's the direction I pursued.
So as you became aware and listening at the table and all that, about what age were you when you were exposed to all this?
Oh, I want to say we left that property when I was about 9 or 10. So it was from as young as I could remember, to 9 or 10. So I remember, my best friend growing up was across the street, and I remember hearing stories that I was like a 3-year-old hanging on the fence or a 4-year-old hanging on the fence when I first made a connection with him growing up. So I could probably say from that window, from 4 to 9, I was exposed to it. So
So that's a good early age to. So here's the point I'm getting at, right? A lot of these, a lot of our viewers today are probably not 9 years old. They're looking at this, thinking, "Is this something I should do?" And they're listening to these shows, trying to pull out little golden nuggets to kind of figure out what all this is about to even get started. Now, here you are as a young boy, not even a teenager yet, being exposed to these concepts. You don't even know what you're learning at that point, but
right,
still valuable for you at that age to be starting and getting educated younger than people. I didn't even start till I was in my mid to late 30s trying to figure out all this stuff. And I guess every time I put up my thumb, I get this little thumb on my
nice.
podcast there. So yeah, that's fun. I think if I go like that, I get balloons. I'm not sure, but we'll see. Yeah, so here you are getting exposed to all this stuff. Here our viewers are hearing this for the first time. So were there any other people or influences you growing up that led you to invest in real estate?
I mean, it was probably it was very heavily impacted, like I said, by the Kiyosaki mindset of, kind of having some control over that going forward, and knowing that, my mother had gone down that road. So hard to say that there's much beyond that as an initial setup. But when I was actually a partner in a construction business when I was in college, actually shortly after I graduated college. And when I separated from that business, I made the choice that I needed to get my own property because I had bounced a little bit between, rental, getting in a big complex, and moving back in with my father. So I had kind of seen a lot in a short period of time, and I realized I need to get my own property. And then at that point, it was kind of like the obvious necessity that I couldn't, as a young 20 something, get a single family home. I didn't like the idea of getting into the condo space because of the fact that when I was right out of college, I joined a building envelope consulting company, and that was the primary focus was condominiums and condominium managers. So having attended a lot of board meetings of that, I realized I don't think I want to be at a condo as my first house. So just out of necessity, I was like, well, I got to get into a multifamily where the other unit can help me afford the house because I didn't have a big down payment and it wouldn't have got me like the property I wanted. So just kind of led into that, but it was really the spark was probably having a partner at that time in the building envelope company that was open to the idea of real estate. So it kind of allowed my entrepreneurial brain to start kind of spinning and finding ways to make it work. And as a partnership, we never pursued, but I was still spinning and trying to find ways to, benefit from all of the products that guru courses that I bought when I went to the real estate wealth annex. So there was a lot of material that I was faced with, and it was always like, well, this seems the easiest. Let me try that. That wasn't. Oh, this seems easier. Let me try that, and that wasn't. So it was just a lot of trial and error, and realizing that I wanted I wanted more and I wanted some control over where I ended up. So
I think you're spot on your comments there. I mean, the different avenues that you can take in real estate. It's a simple business model to understand, but it is not easy work.
right.
Right. Absolutely. So you've mentioned Kiyosaki a few times. At what point in your timeline, I mean, from 9 year old, so what happened actually after your parents sold that property? Was there another multi? Was that a single
No,
family?
so that was yeah, that led into that property was in Lowell. And as my family, I had a little brother, and when he came around, it became clear that Lowell was probably not the best place to raise another kid. I mean, I turned out okay, but it was definitely time, I think, that the family wanted to relocate, get to a better school system, and be closer to other families. So we ended up moving to Methuen. And in doing that, we ended up in a single family home, but for a while we kept the two family. And it became a straight up investment property. And I don't remember how long it was an investment at that point, but it didn't last too long. Shortly after that, we decided, well, not like I was part of that conversation, but my parents decided it was time to let go of the property, particularly because it was self-managed, and it was a little further away, so they just didn't want to run back and forth and have to deal with tenant issues or any problems with the property. So they decided it was probably the time, and they got rid of the property, and I was back into a single family home at that point.
Okay. And then, so that was the first exposure in that duplex. And then your next roundabout with multifamily was after the construction business when you
Yep.
did a multifamily. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
and that was around 2009 is when I bought my first property.
got it.
So bought a nice short sale. Everything was on sale then.
Yeah, we were actually loading up the trucks with units at that time. We were purchasing 35 to 40K a unit back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good time. I'm going to jump back to Kiyosaki for a minute here. So you go through high school, you get into college, architectural. At what point or how did the whole Robert Kiyosaki end up on your lap?
That I could probably say that was part of there was one professor in college that he would check the box, you'd get your curriculum, but he asked the question of the class, he's like, who here wants to know how to actually be successful and operate in architectural business and understand how the business operates? And a couple of us raised our hands. Others were there just to, put in their time, get their credits, and move on. But there were a couple of us that had that inkling of there's some financial education here that we're missing, and to make this a business, there has to be some exposure. And I think it was around that time that I was exposed to some other stuff that was outside curriculum. And that was around the time of the Wealth Expo. And it was probably around the time that I actually got my hands on that book for the first time, because it was one of those things that the professor was like, there's a couple books that you should probably read. It might open the door for you, it might not, but that'll kind of be your gateway. And it was for me. And it was just based on him knowing that the school systems were not giving the right type of education to prepare students for graduation. They were preparing you to be a great employee, but ultimately not to be self-sustaining in any way, shape, or form. So I think his taking a bit of a risk, because he was not supposed to be educating us in that space in that way, gave us the feeling that, all right, there's something here, there's some value here, and we pursue a little bit of that education outside of the school, in the classroom. And that kind of opened the door to me to be open to, hey, it might not be in the curriculum, but there's more out there. And then when I read Kiyosaki, it was very much a mindset shift for me that, I can have more control over this if I just look at things slightly differently. And thankfully, I was young enough that I wasn't so upside down that I had to unravel too much. It was like, hey, this is probably a good time to be exposed to this.
So I'm going to ask the question. I mean, I've got a whole box of Kiyosaki books back there with the Trump and all that, the other books that he wrote. Which book was it? Was it The Rich Dad Poor Dad, or was it Cash Flow
Yes.
Quadrant?
Yep. Started with Rich Dad Poor Dad, and since then I've gone down basically the whole library. So
It's like I'm looking at a mirror here,
yeah,
but you're better looking, so I'll give
I
you that.
appreciate that.
Um,
But you're in a better environment. It's a little
well,
unpleasant up here.
okay, well, touche. Well played, Dan. I can't back out of that one. So here we are, right? So you've come forward. You're now into the real estate investing space. And this started, well, if 2001 was the expo and your first purchase was 2009, in your 8 year span of career, these next series of questions are a little bit of a time machine here. I always enjoy these. So it's broken up in two parts. So the first part of the question, if you could go back in time to Dan in 2001 at the Learning Expo Annex, what advice would you have given yourself back then getting started? And then, Dan, today in 2024, what advice would you give to a newbie who's on the fence trying to figure out how to get started? So we'll take you first. What advice would you give yourself going back in time?
I would have cautioned myself against the shiny object, because that resulted in me buying a lot of courses that I really didn't need. So trying to find a way to get additional free education to help hone in on, maybe what aspect of real estate would have been a better fit for me. Which I know now there's lots of free resources to do that. Back then, there really wasn't that I could access super easily. But definitely pick pick an area sooner, and take a little bit more risk going out there, because I ended up with a two family, and in hindsight, I should have pushed that limit up and got myself into a four family first, and that would have kind of helped springboard even more.
You mentioned pick an area. I'm going to unpack that a little bit. Do you mean as in location or type of property, or what are you referring to when?
So yeah, type of investment strategy, right? So I was big on tax liens for a while. And that was like when I went through the expo, that was like where I was gonna get rich quick, right? I was gonna buy all these tax liens and end up with a bunch of properties, and it was gonna be a sweetheart deal, and it was gonna all work out. Didn't work out that way. And then it was, all right, I'm gonna have to go after foreclosures and auctions. Got a little education in that and realized I didn't really like where that was going. So then it was flipping, and I was like, oh, I could definitely do that whole thing. And that's kind of where the matching up of the passions with construction and real estate would have come together. But ran all sorts of numbers, couldn't make that really work. And then eventually I landed on value add multifamily, where I could get the multifamily and still force equity, by doing some appreciation, some forced appreciation work by improving the property. And I was so far away from the buy and hold mindset of how to actually run a multifamily property at that point, which is a whole different set of skills that I have since started to work on gaining, especially with my time with the REIT. So
Oh, wow, yeah, I forgot about the REIT. We're going to get there though. So identify your area for your investment strategy. You went around the wheel on that. Take risk sooner. Buy a bigger property. You mentioned a 4 unit. And just for our viewers out there, there's two classifications on commercial. If you're going to a bank, 4 units and under is considered residential. If you
right,
get 5 units and over and go to a bank, that's considered commercial. Building code wears a different hat. Anything over 2 units for building code is considered commercial. So there's a lot of what are you talking about when you say
right.
commercial, right?
Yeah,
And
and there's all sorts of other gray area with that. If you are townhome style and you own the land you're on, you could expand beyond two family and still be residential.
yeah, yeah,
So it's a lot of interpretation there for for building code.
right. So anybody who's, oh God, anybody who's jumping onto this right now, you're probably thinking in the lender realm or the finance realm that four and under is your residential, and then
Right.
anything over that is a commercial loan. So after you
Right.
get
And
past
that's why
that,
I said four, because again, like I was going for the FHA first time home buyer minimum down payment because I didn't have a lot of capital to my name. So again, that's why I was looking at what's the biggest I could get in the FHA world at that time. And four was the, if I could get myself to that level, it would work out. So that's why definitely in the residential lending side, first time home buyer, trying to take advantage of all those opportunities for first time home buyers.
yeah, that's gold right there for anybody who's listening. The four is for your first time buyer. There's all these programs that Dan's talking about that you can take advantage of. And then after you hit five and you go commercial, like we hit, there's that limit of 10
Yeah.
residential loans that you can get in your name, and then you have to go commercial. We tripped that wire, went commercial, and just never looked back. So now anything I buy is a commercial loan. I don't care if it's a single family house, a 12 unit, 30, whatever. I don't care. I'm going to do a commercial. I'm going to have it in that entity. All right. So really, really good advice that you give yourself. Any other advice that you would have given yourself starting out?
Uh, be open to partnerships sooner. I was very much lone wolf. I still fight with those tendencies to be very lone wolf, and it's some trauma of some bad partnerships in the past, and I let it linger quite a bit. And I'm just recently in the past couple of years starting to get over that and partnering with the right type of people. And again, if I was more open to that and less thinking the world was against me earlier on, I could have really taken the trajectory and just skyrocketed from that first purchase, as opposed to what I did, which was pump the brakes, enjoy life a little bit more, which I don't regret at all. But my investments really slowed down until, just recently pre-COVID.
Well, I'll throw my hat in the ring, either as a JV or a partner, or, if you want to throw a deal over my desk, I'll turn it upside down and tell you what I think. If it's interesting, may write a check. Yep, that's going to be on the show. I said that, right? So yeah, I would throw that out there as well because I agree with you. I mean, my first 13 years in was my wife and I buying whatever we could get our hands on, making it work. And then it wasn't till later that JVs and partnerships opened up the doors to larger deals. So
Right.
yeah, very, very good. Okay, so now spotlight on a newbie investor seeing the show for the first time. What advice would you have for that person?
Get your reps in. I mean, the easiest way to build a callus and not worry about making the wrong decision is to get your reps in. I mean, every meetup I've gone to, I get that question from a lot of new investors, and they always want to hit it out of the park with their first one, and it's like you're putting too much pressure on yourself. If you've paid for an education like I have, I mean, a couple times, I went to college twice, not exactly cheap. But again, you look at it like an education, and if you can reframe it in that way, I mean, I don't want to sound too willy-nilly, but you really can't lose. You know what I mean? If you lose a little bit of money on the deal, consider that your tuition. And that's how I wrap my head around tackling my first flip, was looking at it as, hey, if I lose a little bit of money on this, still cheaper than my college education. And I got a lot of experience out of it. Thankfully, that didn't happen. I was able to make a little bit of money on that, which was great. But yeah, get your reps in. Tour as many open houses as you can to get exposure to real estate. Get a sense as to, you know, rehab cost is what people ask me about all the time. And it's like, you don't need to nail it, but walk some open houses. If you can bring a contractor, that's like way better. And you just ask the question, how much do you think that kitchen costs? Is that a $10,000 kitchen? Is it a $50,000 kitchen? And then when you go to the next open house, how does that one compare to the one you just saw? Is that a $5,000 kitchen? And then you start to get a mental scale of what things are going to cost. So when you walk into that next open house, or if you get a deal that slides across your table, speed is important in real estate, especially if things are seems too good to be true. You have to be able to act fast. And I mean, I've made a handful of offers, sight unseen, pretty risky offers, but they didn't feel super risky because I had put in my homework. I had seen enough properties to have a sense as to, all right, worst case scenario, this is where my rehab costs are going to be, and I think I can still make this work. So
You're bringing all the gold to the table here. I was going to ask you, for that newbie, you're saying put the reps in, and then you explained it all. The open houses, getting a contractor, maybe getting him coffee or whatever he enjoys, have him tag along with you on a few and ask those questions. So that newbie starting out, and I'll put this in a gym analogy here. You want to get your reps in, but you don't know if you want to work arms or legs or what. How do you know which muscles? How do you know which muscle groups? How do you know what real estate, what industry, whatever? And that, I mean, I could ask 10 different real estate investors for advice and get 12 different answers. So
right.
whoever that newbie is getting the reps in, you got to kind of figure out your buy box. You got to know where and what you want to go after. And no one can really, say this is what you should do, because everybody's going to have a different flavor of ice cream that they like. I just met an investor the other day. She was swearing up and down vanilla was the best flavor. So what do you do, right? And said, do you want that sprinkles or anything like that? No, just straight vanilla. Okay. So bring it back to the newbies here. You got to get educated, reframe your education, take action, get out on those open houses, even if you don't know what you're looking at. I mean, if you can't get that contractor there with you, if it's an open house, ask the other people who are walking around, or if they have a contractor, network there, bring business cards to the open houses, get started there. But I don't want to answer the question. This is your show. What other tips would you give to that newbie who's on the fence today who wants to get into real estate?
I mean, I find a lot of people are trying to get the solution without going through the bumps. You know what I mean? And like you said, like, how do you identify what your buy box is? Like, you have to get into these things. You have to start to see it and feel it and get a sense as to, what I liked about that last house was it was 2 stories up and down as opposed to 2 units side by side, and you start to get a preference. And then you start to look into those preferences and say, all right, is that a good model? But if you're just shooting at anything that comes across, you're not going to be focused in enough to make it make sense. So again, it comes down to the reps. Like, you're not going to be able to identify it by staring at a book and determining, oh, that's definitely the type of unit I want, and that's the market I want. It's all a little bit more subjective than that, where you kind of have to go out there and feel it and see it. I mean, things might look great on paper, then you go down there and you realize this is really not the neighborhood you want to be in. Because again, you could pick a town and hear great things about that town. You go look at a property and realize you're on the wrong side of that town, or even the wrong side of that street. And some of those things you just have to get experience, with and seeing it. Or like you said, going to meetups and talking to people about their experiences. Like, hey, I'm looking at properties in this part of town. What do you think? And then they can tell you, hey, I've been investing in that part of town for a long time, and as long as you stay to the left of Main Street, you're fine. You go on the right side, you're in trouble. So again, like, take the collective knowledge that's available. And again, like, starting out, I was terrified of other investors. It was always, they're my competitors. Everybody just wants the deal. They're not going to share with me because they want me out of the game. And what I've come to find more so being in this space is there's a lot more generous real estate investors out there than there are the ones that keep everything tight and close to the vest. Like, we want to see other people succeed because, like, we might not have the same buy box. And like you said before, I mean, fast forward, they might be a partner down the road, or you might be able to help somebody level up their game. And next thing you know, you turn around and they have 150 units under their belt. And it's like, wow, I remember when.
Yeah, and I've seen that just the first year doing the show. I mean, Andrew Freed, when he came on, was focusing on getting to 100 units. I think I just saw a post like maybe 2, 3 months after the show. he
Yep.
just surpassed 180 units and been able to leave his W-2 job. So
Exactly. Yep.
yeah, you put in the reps. There it is, right? And consistently too, right? You like if I do 100 sit-ups last month, it's not going to carry over to this month. So,
Right.
I'd be better off to do a smaller amount consistently than, pull out my hair on a weekend and then never touch it again for 3 months. It's not building the relationships that you need. You have to
Yeah.
be there and, well, we can go down that whole rabbit hole
And,
another.
and I mean the consistency in the reps thing again, if I was talking to a new person, this happens a lot. Like I've gone to a lot of meetups where I see somebody for the first time and I never see them again. Because they didn't get a deal or they didn't get the silver bullet or the golden ticket. You know what I mean? They didn't get the answer right then and there. And that's fine. I mean, there's going to be some washout, you know what I mean? But if you really have a passion for it and this is what you want to do, it took me months of going to these meetup events. I was always in the back of the room, you know what I mean? And it took the better part of a year, I want to say, of just going to these things and not expecting anything of it, but just being there, being in the room with the right people. I start to recognize faces. And then I start to like search them out and figure out what they're doing and realize, wow, this guy's really active, or that lady just bought like a massive deal. Like I might want to talk to her at some point down the road. But I mean, I'm a fact gatherer, you know what I mean? I'm a bit of an introvert. I kind of assess and analyze a bit more. And then I was given the opportunity to stand in front of the room and present on a deal. And after that, it was just like people started assuming I was part of the company. I was part of the real estate brokerage because I was at everything. I was always at the events. I was everywhere. And they're like, oh, well, you're a broker. I mean, you're an agent, right? I'm like, not an agent. I just show up. And that became my reputation was Dan's going to show up and he's going to put the work in and he's going to be here for that. And it grows from there. So don't expect to strike gold day one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that is super important. I'm glad you mentioned all that because I think I heard Ann Bellamy say at one point in time that if you start going to these meetups and these groups, people are watching. People are watching.
Yep.
And if they see you there 2 or 3 months, okay, now they notice you. When they see that you've been there a year, they say, okay, you're one of my tribe members. You're in my
Exactly.
circle. You're in my tribe. So, what are we talking? We're talking 12 meetings. Big deal, right?
Yep.
You'd waste more time than that binging on Netflix in a weekend. So,
Right.
yeah, and you meet some interesting people and you hear some interesting stories and you'll learn some stuff that could really have a trajectory on your success and your path. So,
Absolutely.
absolutely good stuff. Anything else that you would offer to a newbie starting out today?
No, I don't want to overwhelm them. I'd say that's probably where I would say is
Okay,
don't try to overwhelm yourself either. Like just take the little wins. You know what I mean? Just put in a little bit of effort consistently. Put in the reps.
good stuff, good stuff. All right, so we're going to jump into the next segment here where we're going to talk about a property that you've purchased and owned. So this has a couple parts to it as well. I'm going to ask, what's the deal? What's the deal? That's short for best deal, right? What's the best deal you've ever done? What type of property was it? How did you find it? And how did you finance it?
Whew. Um, that's tough because there's a lot of different buckets that I could pull that from, but I'll go more so kind of personal portfolio wise. Probably the most rewarding um, would be I got a six family property in Lowell from direct mail, which everyone was cautioning against. It's a waste of money. It's expensive, and I just happened to get this deal to work, and uh, I got it for like 100 grand less than. So I was marketing directly to the seller.
Mhm.
The seller was, I guess, getting irritated by the amount of letters I was sending. But there was something about it. I don't know if he recognized the name or there was some sense of familiarity So he gave my information to an agent, and he basically told the agent, he's like, clearly this guy wants the property. I need you to get it ready for sale, but call this guy anyway and see what's going on. So I kind of inspired him to get this property on the market, which was not the intended effect I wanted, but I got a call from the agent. Again, he was like, "There's something familiar about you, and my client wants to put this on the market, and this is what I'm thinking of put it on for." And I was like, "Ooh, okay." I was like, "I'd love to see it." And he's like, "Well, before I get it ready to list, he's like, I have to go there and get photos and things like that." He's like, "Why don't you and I meet? And if you can meet me at the same time, then I'll let you see the property, but I'm not stopping the train. Like, I'm planning on putting this on the market." I'm like, "Absolutely, I got it." So I showed up there, walked the property, and I told him, I said, "I want this deal, but I can't come to near where your number's at." So there was some negotiating in the background, and we were trying to make it work. I tried to bring another agent to the table, and that started to sour things pretty quick. So again, I wasn't, and I recommend to anybody that's newer to it, don't just go with the dual agent where they're representing both sides, because they're not representing you necessarily as the buyer. Their real responsibility is going to be for the seller. But I was okay with that because again, I had put in my reps. I kind of knew where the skeletons would be, and I was like, you know what, I'm willing to take the risk. If I can get him to come down on the price, I'll make it as easy as I possibly can to get through this process. No contingencies, because after I walked it the first time, I was already looking at some of the things I'd have to do. So I already had a sense as to how much I'd have to put into it. And a lot of conversations later, and again, leaning on this familiarity that it was partly my name, partly the area that I was getting this property in, and the guy seeing my face for the past like 8 months, because my name or my face was on that letter for the past 8 months that I was sending this letter out. And again, like, I don't know how, but it built some level of trust before I even walked in the door. So with that, I was able to leverage that a little bit, and secure the property for about 100 grand less than he was going to list it for. And I think it appraised for just about 75 or 80 grand more than I got it under contract for. And to date, it's already gone up probably another $120,000 in value. Um, so still working on stabilizing it. It's a tough area, so we're dealing with a lot of objections and things like that. But I would still say that that's been a great property for me. It was the first commercial deal, 6 family.
Right.
And again, going through the lending, I was actually buying a 4 and a 6 at the exact same time, and through the same bank, but I was dealing with residential on one side and commercial on the other. So I was like running these things like parallel, and I just kind of liked a little bit more of the process on the commercial side. And again, my commercial lender, when I was going through that process, there was again some familiarity because he was at these meetups, he had seen my name. So again, it somehow built some inherent trust there that um, we were able to work through a lot of the hurdles a lot faster because it's a little bit more relationship based on that side. So it was very helpful.
Okay, so we know it's a six. It originally came through a direct mail campaign, inspired the seller to hire an agent who came to you. There was a little back and forth. So let's see, what type of property? Where was it? Lowell? How did you find it? How did you finance it?
Commercial loan. So it's an adjustable, um, but again, it was based primarily on uh, it wasn't a DSCR loan, but it was heavily driven by the pro forma and the plan, the
So
business plan on getting the rents up within a year, which we did. So
adjustable rate mortgage.
yes, sorry, yep,
No, that's fine. That's fine. All right. So if you're okay with it, I'd love to start plugging in some numbers here.
sure.
So you told me you got it 80 less than, I mean, 100 less than what they were asking. It appraised 80 over what you purchased it for. So what was the purchase price?
Purchase price was 860.
And what year was this?
This was 22.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. So they were in the 960 ask,
Yep.
and 80 more would have put it at 940 appraisal after purchase.
Yes. Yeah, it appraised I think just under 940.
Okay, I'll go 940. We'll say you had washing machines in there or something, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And what was the down payment? What was the split for down payment and mortgage? 20%?
Believe it was 25%.
Okay. My handy calculator.
Yeah. It was about 215 was the down payment.
Spot on. Okay. So mortgage was 645.
Yep.
And the 215 came from,
So this was actually my first deal with a partner. So I had enough funds from a HELOC, from another deal, that I was able to do it myself, but it was at that point where I was facing, do I bring partner in or not? And I thought, well, can't hurt to put it out there. So I ran my numbers by a few people, trying to get them to give me some opinion before I presented it to prospective partners. And one of the guys I presented it to was like, don't show it to anybody else. I'll give you half of that money. And I was like, okay, cool. So we split that 50-50. So we are 50-50 right down the middle, on that.
all right, that's what I needed to know. So,
I think we came to table with like 230, 240 maybe. I think it was 230 with some closing costs and everything like that.
okay, good, good. So your all in was 115, his all in was 115. That's 130 to the table. And you mentioned that you'd already at closing had 80K in equity.
Right.
And then recently, was it recently appraised at 120 extra?
It was recently looked at and not fully appraised, but a broker came in and tried to sell it for me. And I told him I'm not interested, but he gave me a full commercial workup. And he basically said that he could sell it on the market today for 1.15, which I thought was a little aggressive. So mentally, I've dropped it down in my head to like 1,050,000.
Okay. Yeah, let's go with your number. So we've got 1,050,000 minus your mortgage of 645. That was 405 in equity at this moment. You had 130 into it, actually into the deal. There's 275. Did you have any renovations, rehabs that you had to do to it?
Yeah, we did some pretty heavy turn work in there. I think to date we're probably 50 grand in
Okay,
capex and turns.
so if my numbers are correct, that gave you 225 in equity on this deal within 2 years.
Sounds about right.
Okay, splitting that down the middle because you're 50-50 partners. You know you made all your money back plus 112, right?
It was a decent deal.
Okay, now here's the bonehead question. How much did the stamp cost?
uh, I mean, how much did my whole direct mail marketing cost?
That's a
I'd
better
say
question.
yeah.
Yeah,
I've done the numbers. I've done the numbers a couple different ways. So my entire direct mail campaign out of pocket was about $3,800. And that was over the course of 8 months. And I think it was a list of like 1,400 names. But if you look at just this one deal, $16 worth of mail got me that deal.
yeah. Even if you deducted the whole thing, you've cleared over $100,000 on this deal. So
Right.
earlier on the show, you had mentioned direct mail, and some people say, oh, it's a waste of time or it doesn't pan out. One deal pays for the whole campaign plus.
Right.
And $100,000 is a nice return for the work that you had to do in this. So
Right.
even if it took you 2 years, that's 50K a year on one deal.
Yeah.
That's like pretty close to a college student's income graduating without the student loan, of course.
Right.
'Cause you're going to have the tenants paying down the 645 because that was all baked into your numbers. Six families, really nice deal. Yeah, this is a really, really nice deal. And we're just looking at your numbers here. You made the 50K a year. Your partner also made the 50K a year.
Right.
If you pulled this down all by yourself, you cleared 200 on this deal.
Not a bad
Why,
day's work.
yeah, why would you not do this, right?
Right.
Wow. That's one of my favorite parts of the show when you pull it all apart and people are saying, oh, I could never do this, I could never do this. You did have to come up with 115,000. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's that hard part of it all. But how did you do that? You came up with the deal, you came up, you brought a deal to the table. By accident, showed it to someone who actually wanted to invest with you.
Right.
So, I mean, if you had had two different people come into this without having to do it as a syndication, and you even carved out a percentage of that for yourself, how many deals could you do all day long that you didn't have to put any money into?
Yeah. That it would be definitely impressive to keep marching down that. Because again, if you're bringing the value there, then
Yeah.
absolutely. And I mean, we could have split it a bunch of different ways. And even since then, my partners had made it pretty clear. He's like, you gave me a sweetheart of a deal, right? He's like, because he's essentially a silent partner in this. And he has no problem with that. He's like, you have the experience in the space. You're going to make sure the renovations are done right. You're going to manage the manager because I do have a professional manager involved. And so he's like, I just have to sit back and you tell me, are we doing okay? Are we not doing okay? Do we need to put a little bit of money in because the reserves are getting low, or do we need to sign up for a new contract and maybe want to get rid of one of the vendors? Like I just have to give him updates, but he trusts me implicitly. And he very clearly has said a couple of times, he's like, you probably should have split this a little differently. He's like, but I'm happy we split it 50-50.
So we just looked at the BPO, which is the best price offer. We didn't even mention the cash flow.
Right.
So based on the rehab that you had to do at 50K over 2 years, we're looking at maybe $2,000 a month. What is the cash flow before debt service on this or after debt service?
Well, I mean, I will say that we got this thing way under market for rents. I think we had initial cash flow of like $4,200 going in, which wasn't even enough to cover the debt service. So now we are, I think our current gross rents are in the 9,200 range. And our pro forma is still underwritten at about 10.5. So that's the direction we're going. But again, we didn't dump the property. We didn't empty it all out. We wanted to keep the tenants and kind of slowly turn these things over so we could handle our capital a little bit better. So that's our plan right now. So I think I should know this number off the top of my head, but I don't have it. But I think after debt service and the management fees, I mean, it's got to be about $1,000.
Okay.
Which is lighter than we want it to be, but it's definitely heading in the right direction.
Still a deal I would do. Absolutely. And, there's all these other layers to the cake that we're not even looking at. We've looked at your equity, you've looked at your cash flow. We haven't looked at, you mentioned CapEx, and that's a big part of your background. We're going to get into that in a couple of minutes here. The tax deductions that you're able to do to offset your income, And then there's all the pride of ownership, providing the houses. There's so many things that benefit other families, that benefit other people's lives,
Right.
that benefit from real estate. I mean, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, plumber, and electrician, all the people who you put food on their tables. I mean,
Right.
that 50K went into their businesses. I mean, there's just so many areas where it makes sense to do this type of a deal.
Right.
Right. So, anything else you want to add on this deal?
Um, I would I would say pay attention to your your mail from the city. Uh, they ended up tearing up the road right in front of this property as I was trying to list it and show. So it's like I, I had to turn some people down. I'm like, I really don't think I'm gonna be able to get the rent I'm trying to get to when you can't even walk to the building because the sidewalk was ripped up because city got a little overzealous and they extended their utility work a little too far, I think. So timing wise, try to be aware of what's happening around you if it's going to impact your business plan for sure.
Well, if you play the gap and the gain on that, sure, okay, the sidewalk's all ripped up, but the gain is you're going to have a brand new sidewalk when you move in.
Exactly. Yes.
So just, spin that around, which I think the gap in the gain was one of the books you guys raffled off.
Yeah. Yeah. It might have been Gap and Gain, a couple other Atomic Habits, I think. Who Not How. Those were some of the big books that
I
we
think
were leaning
Vivid
on.
Vision was one of them.
Yeah. Vivid
Is
Vision
that?
was the big one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Cameron Harold. Good
Yep.
books.
Oh, wow. I'm going to steal a couple notes out of your pages there. I've got a presentation coming up at the end of July in New Hampshire. I'll bring some nice books.
There you go.
All right, so let's put the spotlight back on you. So, as a real estate investor, what's some of the biggest hurdle, or what's the one biggest hurdle you've had to overcome as an investor, and how did you solve it?
For me, I mean, there's a lot of hurdles. So some of the hurdles I've definitely faced and I'm working towards is I like to look backwards on, you know, rental data, things like that, basically what's already historically been done. So I haven't been forward thinking enough. And because of that, some underwriting on deals were not as good as they could have been. And I let deals go away that people I knew end up picking up because they were more confident in the future cast than I was, because I'm a bit, I look more historical than I do as to what I can project forward. So having a balanced sense of not being too overly optimistic of the future, but also not being so pessimistic that it can never get better. Kind of helps give you a sense of stress testing your deals. Um, and I mean, now I'm at the point where the capital is definitely a bit of a hurdle, but that's something that can be overcome with the right partnerships. Um, because I've done the game of HELOCing and investing that way. But that cycle only works so far on your own portfolio, and then you really have to start looking at the partnership stuff. So I think I did the right thing by bringing a partner in before I hit the wall, because it wasn't out of desperation that I needed a partner. It was an opportunity I was bringing to them that it's like I can take this down on my own. However, this might be a time for me to expose myself to, let's see what a partnership would work like on this deal. And knock on wood, it's been great for this, and it gave us some runway to look at other things. And now this partner had things happen in his life where he's like, I'm looking for the next deal. He's like, so if you can find something, definitely keep me in mind. So it's good to know that there's confidence from that that I wouldn't have had if I had just continued to lone wolf it. So that's definitely been a hurdle, is getting over the lone wolf mindset, and bringing people in, as an opportunity as opposed to out of desperation. Big move.
So, you've got two hurdles. The capital and the partnerships. Brian Burke was on the show, and he brought up a really, really valuable point. Build that credibility kit, right? So you've had some JVs, you've had some partners, and whatever these deals were, whether it's a PowerPoint slide or a couple of one sheets or whatever, put these deals together that you can start to show somebody, right? You've got a
Right.
JV or a presentation. Hey, here's 5 or 6 deals I've done. Here's letters from my investors, their opinion of the deal and how we conducted ourselves. I mean, this is all stuff that's simple once you have done it, but hard until you've done it. You've already done all this stuff, Dan. You've got a credibility kit. I don't think it's going to be difficult for you to cross the capital with a funding bridge. I mean, even on the deal, the letter campaign, there was familiarity. You, the
Right.
broker, all that. You built all that. Um, the not too optimistic, not too pessimistic. That is a little bit more of a mindset.
Yes.
So how can you jump over that hurdle? How do you solve that one?
It's yeah, it's a bit of a Goldilocks conundrum there, right? Um, I mean, I've been very heavy in the mindset space for the past probably 3 years, realizing that part of the growth that I always saw for myself, and the success, right? Whatever we define success as, uh, I had always been more of the mindset of, well, it's outside influence that's preventing that from happening, and that's a really rough way to go about it, but unfortunately that's the way a lot of people go about it. It's casting it externally, and in the past couple of years I've brought a lot more of that internal, and I'm trying to be more open to the fact that I can do this on my own. I mean, case in point was I left my W-2 2 years ago, and in most cases people would have said go get another W-2, and I had the opportunity, but I had done some mindset work to the point where I was like, I know I have something to offer the market at large, and there are people in this space that need what I can provide. So I'm gonna take a chance on me, right? As some other people I know, bet on yourself. You know what I mean? And I went through some coaching programs. I've done a lot of work with coaches. I can't do it alone, and that's what I'm coming to grips with very, very aggressively. Is I need the help. I need the coaching support. I need the partnerships, things like that. So once you start to open yourself up to that, your mindset starts to just naturally see things differently. And we mentioned the vivid vision. Having the vision, and reflecting on it regularly, it builds that reticulating activating system, right?
Yes.
Where if I want a new car and I want a new F-150, guess what you're going to see on the road everywhere is a new F-150. It's not that there's all of a sudden more of them out there, but now you're looking for it because there's something in your brain. So that's that familiarity. I want to become familiar with my future vision so that I see the opportunities when they are presented. It's a constant thing. It's a constant muscle, like going to the gym. Like I have to continue to work that, and I do hit lows, and I just have to remind myself that this is just a down day. Tomorrow's going to be better.
Yeah. Or even a down minute.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't have to carry it. Um, so in your underwriting now, here's the thing, right? You've exposed that this happens. Like you look backwards. So now that you're aware of this and it happens, when you do underwriting now, is there like a little red flag or a bell or a whistle? It's like, oh, okay, so I've done it the way I always do it. Do you run like another set of comps on it with a projection going forward?
Yeah, I look more at trend versus point in time. It's very easy to do point in time, right? I can go check right now, like what's a two-bedroom in Lowell going for? I can check the HUD fair market rent, and I can check what's available on Craigslist right this second or on Facebook Marketplace, and I could know as of right this minute roughly what is a two-bedroom going for in Lowell, let's say. But not realizing that maybe that same unit was 5% cheaper 3 months ago. Or maybe, I mean, COVID just blew rents way out of the water, and there were people making money hand over fist that the market saved them. And I don't want to be in that space where I relied too heavily on that bump. I want to look more conservatively. So I look further back on the trend and realized that there was that black swan event with COVID. But before that, how was this market trending? And is there anything in this area that would give me any sense that the market rent is going up, right? Starbucks is a big example of that. If there was a market I was looking at before and there was no Starbucks, and fast forward a couple of years, all of a sudden there's a Starbucks, they spend a lot of money on their marketing as to where they're going to put these stores. So I might give myself a little bit more credit on the future trend, as opposed to, oh, it's going to be stagnant at this rent for the next 10 years. But again, I try to be conservative on that as well. So I don't want to bank on that appreciation, but I do want to know that there's some room there, and it's my job to find a way to get it, or think more creatively and find out, is there an amenity that this property needs that I might be able to get some additional revenue out of. I mean, I had this happen at a 4-family where everyone that underwrote this 4-family, it was a small property, but they underwrote it for the units. They kind of forgot the fact that, well, there's a storage unit out in front that I could possibly cut that out and rent those out. Or if you're looking at like coin op laundry or something like that, or offering storage in a basement if you have a nice big space for it, or even pet fees, you know what I mean? Depending on where you're at, and if that's something that's not really a common thing, there are ways to look at other things. And again, from dealing with the REIT space, they were good at, here's your market rent, and oh, by the way, we have a gym and we have a pool and we have a dog park, and oh, you have to pay for parking, and oh, you want parking right next to your building? That's a premium. So not that I want to say that you want to look at that, but you don't want to just focus so hard on the unit is the unit. You have to look at, what else can I offer to make this unit more valuable? You know what I mean?
Again, you're bringing more gold to the table because any investors who currently own portfolio, if they rewind the last 2 minutes and listen to everything you just said, they could take another look at their own portfolio, and are they maximizing any of that stuff? The storage, the pet fees, the parking. Um, what was it? I just heard the city of Fitchburg. There's an ordinance right now where they're going to start charging you for parking, or this, like, a driveway tax,
Yeah.
right? If you have a driveway, you're going to get taxed. Well, I've got landlords screaming saying, "Well, I'm going to get taxed." I says, "Well, you also have a lease with your tenant that says if the government raises taxes, that's going to get passed on to them."
Right.
So, I mean, not the best news for the renter, but these things are going to happen, right? And parking is just one thing, the dog park and all of that. I mean, you may not be able to do a dog park, but can you allow pets? And I don't just
Right.
mean the support, emotional support, companionship of service animals. I mean, if you're going to let Martha have a little chihuahua, fine, right? But there's
Yeah.
all that
I
goes.
mean, it's a case, it's a very clear cut case, right? If you have a unit next door, no pets allowed, and they're trying to get $1,500 a month for the rent, and you have an identical unit on your property, and you will allow a pet, as a pet owner, I'd pay a little bit more for that.
Yeah.
That unit is more valuable to me, because otherwise I have to consider getting rid of Fido, and that's not going to work for me. You know what I mean? So you realize that there is benefit, especially in markets that don't promote that. And I like to have smoke-free properties. You know what I mean? And there are people that they pay for clean air. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, your property is definitely more valuable because I don't have to worry about somebody smoking in my backyard and my kids inhaling that secondhand smoke. So you have to kind of look at it from a bigger picture of not unit for unit. It's what else comes with that unit. What's the environment like that you're putting with it? And with the bigger communities, I mean, packages are not going away. Amazon is not going out of business anytime soon. So, do you have the space to put a package locker system in? You provide security to your tenants that their packages are going to be locked up, but the locker system itself costs money. And depending on the company you go with, there are companies that we were working with before that there's a revenue share where you buy their product, their storage lockers. There is a subscription fee that has to be paid. If you want your packages protected, you pay a subscription fee for that storage locker access, and your material gets stored in the locker. And it's not massive, but still, you put that over a 300 unit property, and the pennies add up. And again, people have some confidence that porch pirates aren't going to come, take their dog bowl from them. So it's beneficial and it's valuable,
You're bringing a lot of good stuff here. Um,
I'm glad.
I'm going to keep moving here. So we've touched on this one a little bit, and it always comes up, or most of the time comes up as the purple book. But I'm going to put it out there. Is there a book that had the greatest influence on you or impact on you in your real estate investing career?
I mean, yeah, Rich Dad Poor Dad got the wheels moving. But since then, I mean, it's it's an insane library. I mean, I thank God I found Audible. I spent a lot of windshield time and I've gotten a lot of books. And I mean, they all have so much value in their own right. I mean, Vision was a huge one for me to get some clarity. And being a guy that likes to, lone wolf it, who not how was very impactful.
Oh, yeah.
So and again, it's just you got to find the right tool, not everything's a nail. You got to find the right tool for the problem you're facing, and there's plenty of resources out there for that.
Hence the glass hammer.
Hence the glass hammer.
Very, very good. So you've answered my next question already. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Kiyosaki. Vivid Vision was by who again?
Cameron Harold.
And then Who Not How, I believe was Dan Sullivan.
Yep, Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy.
All right, I'll definitely throw those on the notes. I'm actually reading right now The Gap in the Game, Dan Sullivan.
Great book. That's a
Been
great
on,
mindset book.
been on my reading list for a while, so I've been chugging through, and I think it came up on a couple different shows. As you know what, I'm going to dust that one off. So I'm doing that one right now. I forgot what I just finished, but that doesn't really matter. You've given us three great books. Is there another one off the top of your head that you think was really impactful for you as a real estate investor?
I would say one book that I read frequently is The One Thing, because it's in the world that we're living in today. It is hard. It is hard to stay focused. Um, and really, when I feel the most overwhelmed with options and things that are in front of me, and which direction do I go, being able to really take a breath and think, well, what's the one thing I need to do today that'll move my business forward? It helps to remind myself of that pretty frequently. So that's probably an annual read for me. I try to do that at least once a year. So it's very, very helpful.
Now, is that on Audible as well?
Oh yeah, everything's on Audible. I
Wonderful.
should I don't know my stats off the top of my head, but I get those emails from Amazon and Audible every once in a while. I'll be like, oh, you did 500 hours, good job, and I'm like, geez, where did I get 500 hours from? But yeah, but it's good. I mean, now it's a bit of a, ooh, what can I consume next? But it's challenging because I don't want to just consume for the sake of consuming. So I want to focus on what am I struggling with right now, and is there a resource out there that can help me with that? And once I realize, I try to have like I do like a voice journal after some books. I try to voice journal it if I'm not making notes in the margins or something like that, if it's a physical book. But I try to do a voice journal so I can reflect on what did I just get out of this. And sometimes that sparks all sorts of ideas, and it's like, oh, I got to look at doing it this way, or I got to reach out to so and so because this just made me think of it.
I'd never heard that before, a voice journal. That is so smart. Because
Yeah.
like I'm an old guy, right? Yeah,
Yep.
that's me. But I also do the phone and I dictate letters to myself all the time, but I never made the connection. So
Yep.
yeah, voice. What did you call it again?
Voice journal.
Voice journal.
Yeah, so I just reflect on the book and what I got out of it, and it's helpful because sometimes I can't write it down, especially if I'm driving. It's a
Yeah.
lot easier for me to just pause the book, go to my voice notes app, record a quick note on, hey, remind myself to do this or whatever, or I was really impressed by what I just heard here because it reminded me of a story back then that I can lean on and grow from that. So it's just collecting those notes. And then nowadays, like I use the voice notes app on my phone transcribes it as well. So I can have the written version and it's tied to the audio file so that if I'm searching for something. Like I remember thinking that there was something about a brainstorm. So I just search my notes and it comes up in the text and then I can listen to the voice journal.
That's gold. I mean, I always learn something from a show. And for me, that's I'm gonna start playing with that toy. I already have the toy.
Absolutely.
Start playing with
We
it,
carry
right?
it with us everywhere.
I didn't know Lego could do that. So we're almost done here, and I thank you so much. I know that you've got at 2 o'clock, so I want to get you off the podcast here. Um, what's next for you, and why not get started today?
What's next for me is I'm still working on growing my consulting business. So that's kind of been my heavy focus. But it's more, I want the two worlds to connect, my investment side and my service side on the construction consulting work. So finding the right partnerships is what I'm looking for. And unfortunately, there's no real easy formula. I can't really do a quick search on Facebook to identify it. So what I'm struggling with is the marketing and getting my message out of that I'm out there, that I'm helpful. I'm able to do certain things in the space that maybe other people are not able to do, especially because of my background in the institutional world with the REIT. Um, so marketing has never been something I've been super faced with having to do. So now that's where I'm at right now, is trying to find that to grow my connections, grow my partnerships, as opposed to just head down and just work and service what I currently have. So that's where I'm at. What's next for me is hopefully some more big partnerships in the multifamily space, where I can bring my knowledge and experience to the table and really impact some of these deals and some of these partners.
Now comes the curveball. This is a question that's not on the notes. So I always throw this one in at the end of the show, and I always get some really great answers here, or should I say questions. What's the one question on today's show I did not ask you that I should have?
Oof. Um, I guess how is it that I help multifamily owners? Um, and I would say in that vein, I mean, again, my background in the REIT space, I was with a REIT for about 10 years and I ran all of their capital construction in the Northeast, which resulted in some really large deals, some really big insurance losses, but mostly like managing their capex over 10 years, averaging about $7 million a year in planned capital and some unplanned capital. And now I'm bringing that to the smaller multifamily space, because I think that there's a lot of multifamily owners that are scaling, and they get a little nervous about large capex and large value add projects. So that's kind of where I can help provide some guidance. And on the larger multifamily owners that have a large portfolio, allocating their capital across a portfolio is sometimes not an obvious decision, because you kind of go where the squeaky wheel is, but you have to look at your business plan as well. If you're going to disposition that property in 3 years, then there's only so many capital projects you should be looking at that fit that window. Otherwise, you're just spending, good money after bad, and it's just not going to be worth it in the long run. I mean, one of the things I was most proud about, and one of the bigger deals that I was a part of, was we renovated probably 25% of the property. We did full unit rehabs of about 20% of the property. And by showing the proof in the pudding that we upgraded 20%, this is what we're doing now on the gross rents on those units. Now it made the deal that much more appealing. Like I was saying before, the future trend, it's like, yeah, current rents are X, but if you look at what we just did to 20% of the property, you can apply that on your own if you buy this property, and you can now capture that gain. And because of that, you're able to sell it at a little bit of a premium, because you've already proven the example. You know what I mean? You've already taken the time to put your capital at risk to try it, make it work. And now it's there. Now it's a proven method.
So I've got about 6 pages of notes here from our interview today. So everything that you just talked about, helping other investors looking at their portfolio, CapEx, rolling all this out and figuring it out, where's the sweet spot for you? What's if you could pick the type of market or properties you want to play with, where's your sweet spot?
So for that type of service, I mean, the clients tend to be in the 500 to like 2,000 unit range, because over 2,000 units, you have kind of more of the foundations of an institutional player, where you're starting to have big teams involved anyway. And if you have under 500 units, the formula I'm seeing is there's a lot of do-it-yourselfers that are still in that space. I mean, it might be a little bit lower, but there's a lot of owners and operators that still tackle it on their own, which might be holding them back from bigger capital projects because of it. But definitely it runs the gamut of class A to C class properties, because there is some value that you can add to planning your capex on an A class property, because you don't want to be surprised. You know what I mean? On A class properties, you think this thing's going to be turnkey, it's going to be beautiful, you're never going to have to do anything about it. Turns out it's a 10-year-old class A property that just had some nice cosmetics done. But guess what? Some of those bigger, utilities and equipment in the background, the infrastructure, you might start to have some issues with that. And if you're not paying attention to it enough, it could surprise you. And I dealt a lot with that with the condo world, because I got heavily into reserve studies and things like that to make sure they had enough in the bank to afford the $100,000 roof that's probably 3 to 4 years out from needing to be done. Do you have enough money in there, or are you going to knock on the door of all of your owners and say, hey, special assessment time, you need to pay for the roof now, here's your bill for $20,000. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that visit. So it's locally, I can get around a lot more locally in the greater Boston area, but I am supporting other people across the country. Like there's a client of mine that's developing motels into, or 1-bedroom hotel rooms into 1-bedroom multifamily spaces down in Tallahassee, Florida. He's also done some stuff in Omaha. So we'll see, but I'm expanding out from there and helping all those types of owners.
I'm glad I asked the question that I didn't ask. That was really great. And I know that you mentioned marketing is going to be one of your challenges. This last segment that you just did here, that's like perfect if you want to get that out on your website or whatever, or your social media, give it to a VA or whatever. More than happy to get that for you.
Appreciate it.
Dan, Mr. Milinazzo, we are near the end here. So any of our viewers, any of our investors, that guy, the investor with the 2,000 units, who'd really love to get in touch with you, how would you like our viewers to get in touch with you or reach out to you?
You can get me on just about all the social media platforms. The handle is Real Value Dan. It's either realvalue.dan or Real Value Dan. So I'm on Facebook and Instagram as realvalue.dan, and then LinkedIn and YouTube as Real Value Dan. But yeah, just Google it, Real Value Dan, and you'll probably come up with my face a couple times. But I'm happy to help, happy to jump on a call and work through some issues, give you some strategy if possible, and maybe we can do a deal together. But I'm happy to bring my my institutional background to the table and help you get through some stuff.
Well, you're definitely going to be part of my network because I'm dealing with a lot of investors right now. There's a lot of syndicators out there. Oh, how do I say this? They're waiting the next 12 to 18 months. And right now we're in June 2024. So if you're watching this 3 years from now, markets change. But I have a lot of investors on the sideline with dry gunpowder waiting for the markets to do what they're inevitably going to do. And your talents and your skills, bringing those to the table, can make a lot of introductions. I'd be happy to.
I appreciate that.
Sure, sure. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are here at the end of another show. Again, I want to thank you, our guest today, Mr. Dan Milinazzo. Oh, God. It was bound to happen.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Milinazzo, Mr. Milinazzo. Any last words for our viewers today?
Put in your reps. Put in your reps.
I am going to edit that out. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dan Milinazzo, thank you so much for visiting us on another episode of the Why Not Real Estate Podcast. This is Brian Lucier, your host, signing off, and we'll see you on the next one.